August 9th, 2024. A second anti-immigration rally is organised at Belfast City Hall. Despite the serious disorder of the previous week, anonymous accounts across social media platforms attempt once again to incite anti-immigrant sentiments. As before, no group or political party takes responsibility for the rally, leading to more sinister elements, including masked men, causing concern for the PSNI.
There's a point up here that's must be very important here. I'm just explaining about the whole mask situation. Okay.
See when we're walking about our fucking city centre, I'm Contataki. You're not stupid.
You got kids.
Yeah, we're not here.
This is not about me.
We're not
it's
covered for
about
trouble. We're covered so we can identify you when there's fucking 20 of them and we're walking about on our own. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the trouble here.
Sure. How do you think it feels to us?
Have you got anybody who's in charge? Is there anyone in charge? Is there a spokesperson? Is there a politician? Is there a community leader? Is there someone in here?
I don't know. They don't represent me.
You do me a favour. My name's Ricky. Go and find them and tell them to come find me. Okay. Honestly.
Hey, you're saying intimidating. You're fucking standing there, man. They're standing over an ordinary fucking uniform, on the horse.
This is my uniform tactical support group.
Well, why are you on this side? And there's no one else.
They're over that
I've not
side.
swear.
Do you know what? They are.
How do they look?
Right. You're deflecting. Go and get, sir. Go and get someone.
I'm not a politician.
No, but go and get me someone who is a...
Never fucking was. I won't be here.
Tommy's trying to. He's a formal lad.
Immigrants. Illegal immigrants. Do you know what I mean? We've had immigrants here for years.
Do you know anybody here who is in charge?
Tommy Robinson tried to speak to
Do
his
you know anybody here that's in charge?
Not you. British government.
He's not.
Any time Tommy tries to prove a put his soul in jail, for fuck's sake.
Can you just get me someone who's in charge?
I've tried.
Thank you.
He's arrest him.
This is a public announcement. Authority under 23A, Public Order Northern Ireland Order, has been granted in this location. You're required to remove face coverings. Failure to do so is an offence which may lead to arrest and prosecution.
In response to the previous week's raids and the burning of local stores at Sandy Row, an arrest was made in relation to social media posts connected to the disorder. The man arrested was Clifford Peoples, a convicted loyalist bomber with a lengthy criminal record, including, according to an Iceland newspaper, a charge of assaulting his ex-wife.
Clifford Peoples is someone who would be well known to security journalists of old. He was a member of the Orange Volunteers. He was a member of the UVF in the past. He was convicted of, he was on his way with bombs to pipe bombs, which he then boasted he used to pray over those pipe bombs before they went out. He's a self-confessed pastor. They called him the pipe bombing pastor. He has previous convictions, but when he was released from prison, he would disappear for a while and then he would reappear every now and then. He would almost as if he's been, reactivated to suddenly appear and involve himself in the flag protests or in the Brexit protests. And he was one of the people then who took a case against the British government linked to the Brexit arrangements. Now, bear in mind that there was a case already ongoing of a very similar nature that was led by Ben Habib, Arling Foster, people like Jim Allister, you know, people who are very senior and credible unionist politicians. There was, in fact, no need for another case, and yet we have this case taken by Clifford Peoples, who some people within unionism felt was in order to discredit what they said was a very valid cause against the British government's Brexit arrangements, which they felt drew the North into an economic united Ireland. But yet he comes along with a very similar challenge. During that challenge, he's accompanied on many of those court appearances by a guy called Mark Harbinson. Mark Harbinson was also alleged to be a member of the Orange Volunteers. He was based in Stonyford. He was alleged to be behind numerous attacks on Catholic families who tried to move into that area on the outskirts of Antrim. He is also a convicted paedophile. He was convicted for sexually abusing a 13-year-old girl. He had naked pictures of her. I believe the court case at the time, when I covered it, it was a very long time ago, it exchanged something like 1,700 text messages with this child. And he was convicted of that. So he is someone who would be of a very dubious character, a very sinister character. He is someone that, despite the fact that he has these convictions, remains for some reason in that sort of public life. He still has a following in Stonyford who remain loyal to him despite the fact he's a convicted paedophile, and he's a very close friend of Clifford Peoples. We know they were behind those Facebook accounts in the past, because what you can see is that there are posts being placed on those Facebook accounts which are worded in a very specific way, and then the exact same posts worded in a very similar way will appear on the personal Facebook pages of either Mark Harbinson or Clifford Peoples or other people associated with them. It's not even as if they're trying to hide the fact that they're responsible for these pages. It's not very difficult. And also remember, if you are the PSNI and you're investigating who's behind orchestrating these riots and you look at those pages, well, regardless of whether they think they're hiding their IP addresses, there's ways for them to be able to determine who exactly is behind them.
The arrest of Clifford Peoples for me raised a number of questions. It was widely believed that the Orange Volunteers had been set up by both Peoples and Harbinson, along with a third man, a prolific paedophile that operated from Concora Children's Home, where an MI5 paedophile network abused dozens of young boys. It is also alleged that this group was a front for intelligence services to sow discord within the peace process. So to find out a bit more, I went to speak to Des Henderson, whose film Lost Boys exposed the extent of this intelligence operation.
It's very interesting when you look at the spiderweb of complicity around Kincora. You know, you have the three main people, let's say, who were convicted after an outrage in the Irish press. But what has been very obvious in the years since is that the abuse was known about in the decade leading up to 1980. So all through the 70s, the abuse was known about at the highest levels of security services. I've interviewed at least 4 intelligence officials who worked for British intelligence, who confirmed to me that they knew about Kincora, knew about the abuse and tried to stop it and were prevented from doing so by MI5. Now, you need to dig into that and ask why that was. You know, it was very convenient that the 3 men at the centre of the Kincora scandal were jailed, and the police, the RUC at the time, and the state seemed to be very happy with this result, that those men would go away at jail. They didn't serve very much time, it has to be said. They didn't serve very much time, but they were the face of Kincora and the convictions, and it was felt by the state and by the RUC that our job here is done, it'll go away. But when you dig into this, there's a spider web of complicity. Not only were those 3 men involved, there was a wider paedophile ring operating in Belfast at the time. It included psychiatrists, court officials, people working in the civil service. It included a lot of names. We named, in the Lost Boys, we named 10 people who we could definitively say were not only paedophiles, but were all linked to each other and to Kincora. The most interesting person in those 10 was a man called Alan Campbell. Alan Campbell was the youngest of that group, but he was also the most interesting from the point of view that this is a man who evaded any sort of justice throughout his life, despite some very serious crimes and accusations being laid at his door.
We now know that Alan Campbell was a mentor and close friend of Peoples, visiting him throughout his stint in jail. Campbell, just like Peoples, was motivated by a burning hatred of Catholics, who also believed that the Protestant people of Ulster formed part of the lost tribes of Israel, taken into exile by the Assyrians. In 1998, both men shared a stage together as Peoples burned a copy of the peace agreement. As he done so, members of the crowd chanted "Burn Fenians too," a derogatory term for burning Catholics. Several hours later, a young Catholic student, Kieran Hefferon, was shot dead by the Loyalist volunteer force in Crumlin. In the event of Peoples' arrest, I took a closer look at his recent activities and was astonished at where the pipe-bombing pastor was now building likely alliances.
So yeah, we do have this other strange link. If you think that the links between, I suppose, the Kulak says no Irish patriots and, the members of the UDA is strange, we also have Clifford Peoples, the loyalist pipe bombing pastor, who has also now linked himself up with one of probably the most high profile agents who ever exposed and outed himself here during our conflict, which was the man who called himself Kevin Fulton, whose real name is Peter Keeley. He is now working in Ukraine as some sort of mercenary. He believes he's teaching Ukrainian surgeons how to make improvised bombs. He posts a lot of social media to this effect. Clifford Peoples is now linked up with him. This isn't because I've investigated this and I know this. It's because he posts pictures of himself with Keeley, albeit Keeley always has a mask covering most of his face. Clifford Peoples then went to a Sunday newspaper with pictures of himself in uniform to boast he had been fighting on the front line in Ukraine. Now, I know from speaking to some people who said that is nonsense, but he definitely is in Ukraine. He definitely has hooked up with Peter Keeley. And the really strange thing there is that also we know that Peter Keeley also has links to the far right, because he was at one stage, and I don't know if he still is, acting as an advisor to Tommy Robinson. And that, I suppose, is probably the most high profile far right, person that we can think of currently in prison for contempt of court. But they also had a link. So then you say that, people from all sorts of parts of the far right, from all parts of these islands, regardless of their political persuasions or background, are joining together. And they can only be joining together for one thing, and that's because of this far right ideology, because there's nothing else that links.
Peter Keeley has kept me and a lot of this office very busy over the last number of years. Because of the sheer volume of cases that he's involved in, there's a whole raft of incidents involving Keeley, both during the conflict and post-conflict. And he's been used in different ways by the state, starting off in the IRA. From the period 1979 to 94, he was an embedded British soldier inside the IRA in South Down. And he was involved in a raft of different activities, including murder, extortion, kidnapping, threats, over that 25-year period. And he was involved in an industrial scale in all sorts of criminality, including murder. So post-conflict, he was retained by the state and used in different ways. First of all, he was embedded inside, in my view, a number of dissident Republican organisations for the period after 1994. And more latterly, after the Good Friday Agreement, we have very clear evidence that points to his being embedded and involved in fomenting and compromising a number of business people in relation to all sorts of financial irregularities, most significantly VAT fraud. So that career, if you like, in inverted commas, has spanned the decades, and the common theme throughout it all is his retention and use by state agencies to serve different needs and to serve different ends over that period of time. One of the people who we represent is a man called Sam Rosenfeld, and he has brought to our attention a connection between Peter Keeley together with a man called Clifford Peoples, who has a well-known profile as a former loyalist activist, allegedly involved in different incidents during the conflict. And It was brought to my attention that the two of them have been connected and in fact seen together in some form of unholy alliance in Ukraine. Why that is, or who put them there, or why they're there, I don't know. But suffice to say, that has been brought to my attention, that they both seem to have some form of nexus or connection. To what end, I don't know.
And is it possible you can tell me about the McCartney and Morris case?
Well, we represent the family of Seamus Morris and James McCartney, both of whom were killed respectively in 1988 and 1989. We're taking actions against the state for allegations of collusion between state security forces and the loyalist paramilitaries who were involved in those killings. Those civil actions are ongoing. They're not affected by the Legacy Act, and we're expecting them to come to hearing sometime in the next 2 years or so. But one of the key features of each of the cases is an allegation that there were agents inside the loyalist organisations involved in those killings, and there's a specific allegation, and it's an allegation in relation to Clifford Peoples, that he may have been involved in each of these cases. And we've written to the police authorities following the arrest of Mr. Peoples earlier this year, and we've asked the police, the PSNI, to provide us with any information that they glean from the searches of Mr. Peoples' property, including any hard drives, computers, etc. that may have been seized.
The fact that a man responsible for many murders and a convicted bomber were now teaming up in Ukraine was surely a concern for the PSNI. In determining the extent of this relationship, I spoke to a former member of the intelligence services, Sam Rosenfeld.
Peter Keeley are known for a significant number of years, notably when he came to London. What I know is what I've told my solicitors. About 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 2 years ago, Tommy Robinson had been harassing a number of people. And a video that Tommy Robinson had produced when he thought his car was being tracked. And he made a reference. He said that he could find anybody. And it was a peculiar way in which he said it. So obviously at that point something clicked. I went looking, and then I found that Peter Keeley had been friends with a significant number of people involved in right-wing extremism, including Tommy Robinson. Of course, I then found he had various links to other people involved in extremism, and I raised those concerns with the relevant authorities. And obviously we now know his involvement with extremism has gone to quite a serious development in the aspect of the fact that he's now been in Ukraine with a number of right-wing extremists, and he's actually gone as far as showing some of these extremists, even some from Northern Ireland, how to make IEDs. One of those individuals is a man by the name of Clifford Peoples. What I would have concerns, and I'll make that very clear, is that both Peter Keeley has made bombs, killed police officers, murdered civilians, and murdered British soldiers in Northern Ireland. He's now in a country at war. He's involved clearly with making IEDs. There was a video program made by CNN, a news item, which incidentally that news item linked him and Clifford Peoples in Ukraine at the same time, and in the same building, teaching supposed Ukrainian soldiers how to make terrorist bombs that were used in Northern Ireland. So here you have an individual who's openly admitted to murdering police officers and other people in Northern Ireland, and a man has been convicted of being in possession of a bomb and 2 grenades, who now knows how to make IEDs. And I asked a very simple question, what is the possibility that other terrorists, other people from the conflict in Northern Ireland and elsewhere are being taught by these, and what if they brought this terrorist technology back to the streets of Northern Ireland and the UK?
The CNN video that Rosenfeld is referring to appears to show Peoples in the process of making a bomb. I can now confirm that this is Peoples speaking in the video, with Keeley later giving similar lessons.
The cold effect. So after 3 or 4 days in the cold, if you're leaving it outside or there's no heating, these will last probably 3 weeks.
Ukrainian troops get a lesson on covert bomb making.
That goes through your battery.
British explosives and counterinsurgency specialists pass on decades of know-how to soldiers already well versed in normal frontline combat. But these are no ordinary bombs. They are secret weapons in Ukraine's clandestine arsenal to kill Russians on Ukrainian land.
In photos later posted by Peoples, we can identify the same 2 men in the video, as well as the convicted bomber in a pic with CNN's Nick Robertson. In light of everything we now know about Peoples and Keeley, it is evident that the British intelligence agencies are fully aware of what's going on in Ukraine. This also fits with these same agencies having a constant presence throughout both men's careers. Before I concluded my investigation, I had one last visit to make. I had been contacted by a source that informed me that they had information on Peoples' career within the UVF. The source had corroborated material that had been passed to me by another source many months before. On the 9th of June 1994, 3 members of the UVF were arrested at a house in Ainsworth Avenue, Belfast. Sam Pinky Austin, Ian Spud Wilson, and Jackie Anderson were later jailed for 10 years after they were caught with explosives. This was after another member of the team, Suspect 4, passed information on to his handlers. The 5th member of the team, Colin Crazy Craig, did not show to pick the explosives after claiming his van broke down. Craig was shot dead a week later by the NLA. It is then alleged that the UVF abducted Clifford Peoples in relation to the passing of the information about the bomb-making factory to his handlers. Luckily, he escaped after being hit over the head with a hammer. It is also alleged that after the arrest, Peoples met with his handlers at Carrickfergus Dam, where it was said that comically, when Peoples was briefing his handlers, he fell into the dam and had to be pulled out by both men. In a secret document passed to me by one of my sources, it is alleged that Peoples is listed as Agent Number 10, Arkwright. I was told the reason for this was that when Peoples worked at his florist shop on the Shankill Road, he would wear a long brown coat, just as the character Arkwright did in the TV series Open All Hours. In drawing to a close, and after all that has been considered in my attempts to understand the growth of the far right, I'm left with one overarching question. To what extent is British military intelligence, with their history of criminal agents, paedophile rings, and domestic and international terrorism running the whole dirty operation? One thing's for sure, if events in Ukraine are left unchecked, we may witness scenes in Ireland that we believe were truly confined to the past.